The world saw a mother crying for her children. Tear-streaked face, trembling voice, the picture of heartbreak. On national television, she begged for the safe return of her 2 little boys. Michael, just 3 years old, and Alexander, 14 months. Her name was Susan Smith, and that night, the country believed her. We wanted to. She looked like the kind of woman who should be protected, not feared. We saw grief, not guilt. What no one realized then was that the woman asking for help wasn't a victim at all. She was the reason her sons were gone. Welcome to GBR Life Transmissions. I'm Kaitlyn, and you're listening to GBR Life of Crimes, where we're exploring not just what happened in crimes committed by women, but why they happened and the psychology behind them. Today, we're looking at a story of a woman who turned her own pain into a weapon. This is Susan Smith, the woman who cried wolf. Union, South Carolina, a small conservative town where the church pews filled every Sunday, and the talk never stays private for long. That's where Susan Lee Vaughn was born, the youngest of 3 children in a house that looked stable from the outside, but it felt broken within. Her father, Beverly, fought depression for years. When Susan was only 6, he took his own life. That loss carved something deep into her. Children who experience abandonment at that early learn that love can disappear without warning. It makes you cling harder to approval, to attention, to anyone who promises they won't leave. And her mother remarried a man respected in the church because he was a deacon named Bev Russell. The town saw redemption. Susan saw new rules and quiet tension. Later, she would claim her stepfather blurred boundaries that should never have been crossed. Whether people believed her or not, the pattern itself was clear. Affection mixed with control. Comfort laced with fear. She learned to smile through discomfort, to be agreeable, pleasant, proper, because approval was survival. By high school, Susan was the girl everyone liked. Pretty, polite, and saying anything that sounded right. But that smile was armor. Inside, she carried the same emptiness her childhood had left behind, an ache to feel seen, to feel wanted enough that no one would ever walk away again. Psychologically, this is where we see what is called dependent self-concept. Your sense of worth exists only in other people's eyes. For Susan, every compliment, every glance, every small validation was oxygen. And once you start relying on outside admiration to feel real, you will do anything to keep it coming. She played the role of good girl so well that no one noticed how fragile she was underneath. And when she met David Smith, she thought she finally found safety. He was gentle, steady, a man who offered calm instead of chaos. And they married young, had 2 sons, and built a life that looked exactly like the kind of family she always dreamed of, because appearance was everything. But control doesn't heal a wound, it only hides it. The marriage began to crack. They fought often, sometimes over jealousy, sometimes over nothing at all. And David wanted peace. Susan wanted proof that she was still adored and still special. When the attention faded, she looked elsewhere for it. Small flirtations became full-blown affairs, and each new man gave her that temporary hit of validation, that feeling that she mattered. And when it faded, she fell apart again. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Insecurity driving desire. Desire feeding guilt. Guilt demands more attention to make the pain stop. Eventually, she met Tom Finley, her boss's son, wealthy, confident, and unattainable. But to Susan, he represented escape, a man who could rewrite her story, turn her from the small-town wife into the woman she believed she was meant to be. But Tom wasn't looking for rescue, and he certainly wasn't looking for responsibility. He ended their brief affair with a letter, cold, polite, and devastating. I'm not ready for a family. I don't want children. For most people, that would have been heartbreak. For Susan, it was humiliation. And her fragile identity cracked under the rejection. Because when your entire sense of worth depends on being wanted, rejection doesn't just hurt, it destroys you. This is where the psychology turns dark. What happens when a person's identity is built on attention and attention disappears? They don't just lose love, they lose themselves. And some people would rather destroy everything around them than face that emptiness again. Which is why in late October of 1994, Susan Smith began to unravel. She argued with David, obsessed over Tom, and drifted through the days like she was watching her life from a distance. People later described her calm, even composed, as a quiet kind of numb that can only come after too much chaos. But that calm wasn't peace, it was detachment, a psychological shutdown. When she placed her sons in their car seats that night, she probably told herself she was just going for a drive to clear her head. That's the story she would later cling to. But as she steered through the dark, past familiar streets and sleeping houses, her thoughts were already sliding towards the lake. John D. Long Lake, the same water she had visited before when she felt overwhelmed. This time, though, she wasn't going there to cry. She was going there to end the performance once and for all. That night was quiet. Susan drove through Union with her boys in the back seat, headlights cutting through mist and memory. Michael, only 3, asked where they were going. She told him something gentle, something reassuring. Maybe she said it to herself as well. She stopped at an intersection near the lake, hesitating, as if waiting for permission from some invisible force. Then she turned toward John D. Lake. The road narrowed, darkness swallowing the car glow. She parked near the water's edge. The engine idled. The swiper scraped. The sound of her own breath filled the car. In moments like this, the mind splits. One part knowing what is right. The other, the broken, desperate part, whispers that the pain will finally stop if you just let go. That's what psychologists call cognitive collapse, when emotions overpower logic and delusion starts to feel like clarity. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The air was thick and cold, and she walked to the front of the car, staring at the reflection of the headlights, trembling on the lake. Then she walked to the door, reached inside, and released the brake. The car began to roll. Michael called for her. Alex whimpered, but she didn't move. She watched the car sink, her sons still strapped inside, their cries muffled by the water and metal. And then it was silent. For the first time in her life, Susan Smith had no one left to perform for. She got home slowly so that she could compose her story before she arrived. And then she called 911 and said a black man had stolen her car with her children still inside. And almost instantly, the world believed her. Because that's what we've been conditioned to do. For decades, the media has spoon-fed us the same image of danger. The faceless black man. The dark figure in the night. The one-size-fit-all villain. News anchors repeated her story before the evidence even existed. Sketches were drawn. Roadblocks were set. Helicopters hovered. Entire neighborhoods, mostly black neighborhoods, were searched based on one woman's tears and description that fit every bias the country already had. Susan didn't invent the stereotype, but she knew exactly how to use it. And that's the part that still chills. She understood the power of her own image. A young, soft-spoken mother crying on camera, begging for help. She knew the world would rally behind her, and she knew who it would turn against. Because she'd seen it happen before, we all have. This wasn't just manipulation, it was a weaponized. The media didn't ask questions. They broadcasted her pain like gospel. They didn't challenge the lie. They amplified it. And in doing so, they made clear what so many of my stories have already shown. Evil doesn't always look like the person the headlines tell us to fear. Over and over again, it's the ones who look the friendliest, the most trustworthy, the ones who seem to want to help, who smile sweetly, speak softly, and fit neatly into society's comfort zone, who turn out to be the real danger. It's never been about the color of someone's skin. It's about intention. It's about what lives inside a person when no one is watching. Susan Smith didn't just kill her children. She exposed the truth that the country keeps trying to hide, that the most terrifying monsters often look like the people we're taught to trust. Within hours, police checkpoints lined the road. Reporters arrived. Neighbors searched through woods and ditches. People held vigils, prayed, and cried on her behalf. Susan stood before the cameras with the tears falling on command. The nation fell in love with grief, but something about her didn't fit, at least to investigators, because they started to notice the inconsistencies. The timeline shifted, and the emotions actually felt rehearsed, at least in their eyes. And between interviews and her demeanor changing completely, where she would laugh, and she would eat, and she would sleep easily. In the world of psychology, This is affective dissonance, when the person's emotional response doesn't align with the gravity of their situation. It's not always a sign of guilt, but when the mask slips too easily, it's hard to ignore. 9 days passed before the mask cracked for good. Under the pressure of being questioned, she broke down and whispered, "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to be free." Then she told them where to find the car. When drivers pulled the Mazda from the lake, the sight was unbearable. The car sat on its roof, headlights still faintly glowing underwater. Inside were Michael and Alex, still buckled in their seats. The world that loved Susan Smith turned overnight, as it should. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. The public had prayed with her, believed her, held vigils in her name and the name of those boys. Now they saw that their empathy had been manipulated. That's the psychological impact of performative emotion. When someone fabricates grief, it hijacks our instinct to protect. When the truth comes out, we feel complicit. So of course she was arrested. Officially, and her trial drew crowds from across the country. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse. Protesters carried signs. Inside, Susan appeared small, fragile, and innocent once again, her hair soft, her voice trembling, and her eyes cast downward. Her defense argued that she was mentally ill, had intrusive thoughts that were dangerous towards herself, and overall trapped in despair. They said she didn't mean to hurt the boys. She only meant to be the one to go herself, and she lost control. The prosecution painted a different picture. A manipulative woman obsessed with image and attention who saw her children as obstacles to the fantasy life she could have had. Both were true in a way. Psychologically, Susan was a paradox. She was both a victim and a villain. She was the child who learned that affection could be currency and the adult who used it as a weapon. Her crime wasn't born from rage or hatred. It came from emptiness, a void so deep that she mistook destruction for control, but at the pain of those boys. And when the verdict came, guilty, there was no outburst, no collapse. She simply lowered her head and accepted it. Life in prison, parole after 30 years. The same composure she used to charm the world was now her armor in confinement. Over time, we've come to understand Susan Smith not just as a killer, but as a case study in emotional manipulation and narcissistic collapse. Narcissism at its core is about identity, or rather, the lack of one. When a person builds their self-worth entirely on admiration and control, any loss of that feels like death. For Susan, Tom Finley's rejection wasn't heartbreak. It was annihilation. That's why she didn't see Michael and Alex as separate from herself. They were extensions of her, proof of a life she wanted to erase. In her mind, ending their lives meant ending her humiliation. The crime wasn't about hate, it was about ownership. And it's a terrifying thought that love and destruction can come from the same wound, but for people like Susan, it often does. What makes her story linger decades later isn't just the crime itself, it's what it revealed about us. We wanted her to be innocent because she looked the part. Soft-spoken, well-dressed, emotional, and we expect the villains to look a certain way too, to fit a mold that separates them from us. But Susan shattered that illusion, and yet we still use that illusion today. But the thing is, evil doesn't have a face, it has motives. It hides behind what's familiar and what is safe, and it thrives on what we refuse to believe in can live next door. Her story reminds us that empathy without discernment can become a weapon, not just for the guilty, but for those who believe them. And today, Susan still sits in South Carolina prison, where she writes letters, speaks of redemption, and still claims that she's changed. Whether that's truth or performative, we may never know, because for someone like Susan, the need to be seen doesn't end, it just finds a new audience. She once said she wished she could turn back time, but the truth is people who crave control rarely want to go back. They only want a different ending. I'm sure those boys do too. And for Susan Smith, there was only ever one. This has been GBRLIFE of Crimes, part of GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm Kaitlyn, reminding you that understanding the darkness helps us appreciate the light. Join me next time as as we uncover another case that challenges everything we thought we knew about the criminal mind.